Welcome back to Finnegan's Take. Jerry is busted by the FBI for a murder for hire rap against an SOS member. He's imprisoned at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a dreadful jail and destination that many a bad guy was sent because of Jerry's policing. This begins his odyssey in jail for 11 years. Your ultimate undoing and the charges that stuck against you were a murder for hire plot. There were state charges and indictments that were dropped, and everything pivoted towards this federal case against you. Talk about when that started and how it started. This is 2006 or 7, but how did it begin?
The case was brought against me for the simple fact that my lawyer had talked to me probably maybe 3 weeks before I was arrested. He said, listen, I've been thinking this over. Well, let's go in and talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office and see what they have to say. Let's see what kind of case they have or what they want to talk about. This was before the murder for hire charge. And at that time, I had the attorney. His name was Mike Ficcaro. And I told him, nah, Mike, I'm not talking to those fucking people. Nah, for what? What good is going to come out of that? So they're going to turn everything around, and I don't see any reason to go and speak to them. He said, okay, well, you still think it over. You can get back to me. I said, well, I'm giving you my answer now, Mike. I don't really want to speak to them. Little time went on.
Do you at this moment know why the feds are looking into you?
Yes, the whole SOS thing.
So there's the state SOS thing and the Fed SOS.
Well, my sense is that the state's attorney went to the feds seeking help because their cases were very weak, the state. They had was a pile of shit. They had all these gang members and drug dealers. Who were they going to put on the stand? Yeah, they got us. We're dirty. We're stealing dope money. But that was the extent of it. We weren't stealing drugs. We weren't stealing guns. Not to minimize it. I mean, it's still illegal. We're still stealing money. But the thing is, what are they going to do? Put these guys on the case to say, yeah, I had 12 kilos or I had 120 kilos of cocaine. And yeah, I had some money in the house and they stole it. But their backgrounds were shit. Coupled with that, the way they proceeded with the cases, they had the Fraternal Order of Police presented lawyers to go to the grand jury with these guys who started cooperating, the guys on my team. They sent the same law firm to represent each one of these officers at the grand jury, which you cannot do. Not the same law firm, the same lawyer from the same firm. And they were representing multiple defendants, which caused an issue because you cannot do that. These guys have to have separate attorneys. Garrity issues, they're called, where the state's attorney's office, proceeding incorrectly, not following the rule of law in the court proceedings and the way the court operates and the law operates, and they were not following that. In addition to that, the Internal Affairs Division, the police department, was doing things that they shouldn't have done. They were violating our rights, clearing cases just by saying that we were on the scene, but not implicating us, seeing anybody take anything. They said that Officer Finnegan and Officer so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so were on the scene, and the victim said that narcotics were recovered from his house and some firearms, and also was missing money. Well, they didn't see who took the money. They didn't have the witness, the actual guy saying he saw us take money. So they were actually embellishing on the reports just to charge us, Internal Affairs and the state's attorney's office.
How do you feel when the police department that you're working for turns on you? Is it expected?
We were stealing drug money. I mean, we weren't murdering anybody. We weren't putting false cases on people or imprisoning people falsely. To the contrary, most of the people that we arrested for these drug seizures, these large drug seizures, they walked. They didn't go to prison. I was a little astounded by the fact that some of these judges let these guys off with no probable cause, but they had big-name attorneys who handled a lot of the drug cases at the court at 26th in California. And these judges are familiar with these attorneys. These attorneys contribute to their political funds for re-election. They rub elbows with them, whether it be out in social events or golf settings. It's really kind of a fucked up situation because you got these guys representing all these people out there and they're getting rich, these attorneys, and a lot of them are very successful. And I wouldn't say it's because they're great attorneys. Maybe there's something else going on. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to put my finger on it. But so let me get back to the investigation. They're bringing these guys on my team down to the grand jury. They're rolling over, and they're giving information, which I would later find out, to implicate themselves and me, but more so to make me the ringleader, be it so that I was more senior and more decorated than these guys. And some of these guys could not find dope in the crime lab, I would say. And that's where the Chicago Police Department puts the narcotics that are recovered on the street and holds them. That's how stupid they were. But these guys were starting to cooperate. I found out that Herrera had not cooperated yet. And myself, I'd known Keith Herrera since just out of high school, starting college. We lived in the same neighborhood when he came on the police department as a new guy. He worked in the 8th District. We worked for a short time on the TAC team together. And then when I went back to special operations, he came over there with his partner, John Hurley. His stepfather and I were friends. Kevin Farrett, who's now deceased, was also a police officer with me in the 7th District and in special operations. So I knew Keith quite well, saw him socially. I kind of trusted Keith and felt that he was somebody to lean on because everybody else was cooperating. I was under a lot of pressure emotionally, and I spoke to him. We talk all the time, and he was real nervous, and he's like, Jerry, I'm going to lose my fucking house. If we lose my job, if I lose my job, I said, Keith, listen, you got to relax, man. We have good attorneys. He had a guy named Bob Kuzis, who is now a sitting judge. Bob was his attorney. Of course, I believe that Bob was instrumental in getting to cooperate with the FBI against me to get him out of the case. Keith and I would talk all the time. I'd stop over, check on, see how he was doing because he was melting down. A number of times he would call me, sometimes 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and he would be fucked up, drunk out of his mind. I'd go pick him up. I'd drive him home because he lived in the neighborhood, so he wouldn't have to drive. And we'd talk. We'd actually sit outside his house and just talk. He's like, these fucking guys. He mentioned Frank Villarreal and some of the other guys were testifying, John Brzezinski. And I said, yeah, they're fucking pussies, man. I said, Keith, you know what? We're going to get our day in court. They're just trying to save their skin. He was just, really stressed out. And, the one day he says, I want to kill fucking Villarreal, man. He's a fucking rat and this and that. I said, Keith, we don't want to go there. Kept on and on. And jokingly, I said to him the one day, we'll settle all the family business today. Kill fucking Strachey and fucking Cuneo and Tatalia. It was a joke, like The Godfather. So then we'll kill Villarreal and Brzezinski, making light of it. But he wouldn't leave it alone. He kept fucking asking me about it. Let's kill these motherfuckers. And I said, Keith, we're going the wrong route here, man. Sat on my porch talking over and over about it. And I said, there was a book I read. It was called You Paint Houses, Don't You? And it was written about the killing of Jimmy Hoffa. It was based loosely on that book, The Irishman. I think his last name was Sharon. He was a supposed mob hitman. Told him, I'll get somebody to take care of the paint job. I just kept placating him. And he kept bringing it up, kept broaching it, how anything on the paint job, anything. I go, yeah, I'm working on it. And he kept asking. I told him one day, yeah, the guy wants $40,000. And he's like, $40,000. But Neal, I didn't realize it the whole fucking time. He's recording me. He's wearing a wire for the FBI, not physically wearing a wire. They'd given him a phone. At that time, they gave him a phone.
When did he cross that line? Do you have it? Did it come out in discovery, or did you have an inclination of when that happened? Did he come up with this facade to trap you about a hit, or was it idle chatter of two people trying to placate each other, and then the bulb went off in his head? Oh, this is my way out of here. Now I'm going to go back to the feds, and we're going to really stroke this.
I told him, I'd like to fucking kill that fucking Brzezinski, and it's fucking, he's a fucking rat. He started all this. And I should have never said that, Neal. I was fucking pissed off, but I was talking off the top of my head. There was no plan to kill anybody. The FBI had my phone records. They knew who I called and who I met with because they watched me. They were surveilling me. They knew that there was no plan. There was no money exchanged. There was never anybody hired. But my words and my action, because I met him one day. He told me he had some information. I met him at the Walgreens at Archer in Harlem. And when I pulled in there, I thought it was odd. He was there already. And right next to him, and this fucking place was always busy. I mean, all Walgreens are busy, but I mean, this place was completely busy, and it was hard to park there sometimes. So when I pulled in, there was a spot directly next to his vehicle, which I thought was kind of odd. But at that time, I was taking Xanax. I was fucking trying to fucking stay sane. I was facing an indictment by the state. Really didn't know what my future held, to be honest with you. Probably wasn't thinking as clear as I could have been thinking. I pulled into the parking lot, and there's a woman a little older than me, and she's sitting next to me facing out from the opposite direction. And this fucking lady's staring at me, man. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, making me uncomfortable. It wasn't like some hot-looking woman looking at me, you know what I mean? It was like, what the fuck, I told her, I said, what the fuck is wrong with her? He's like, I got to go inside and get something. So we walked into the store. We're just like small talk. He was looking for something, a battery or something. I don't know. Maybe they wanted him to get me out of the vehicle so they could get a clear picture of me, that it was me that he was meeting with. We walked back out of the store and sat in my car. I saw 3 guys sitting on the corner where the grass is at and the sign for Walgreens. I've never seen anybody sitting there in the time I lived in that neighborhood. So it was kind of strange. And these guys were like in their 30s, kind of dressed like in grunge, like looking stuff. I said, look at these fucking dudes sitting there. Probably like the fucking FBI watching us. Of course, when the audio transcript came out, that never showed up. It was unintelligible on the transcript. There were quite a few things I said that were unintelligible. So conveniently, only certain things were perfect that they got them verbatim. So we got into the conversation, and he's like, listen, man, I got somebody for the paint job. All right, man, that's great. Thinking, yeah, okay. I mean, the guy couldn't find anybody. He's asking me to find somebody. And now all of a sudden he has somebody. So I'm like, okay, yeah, great. He asked me for a picture, and I had a picture of Brzezinski. I gave it to him, which was the most stupid thing I could have ever done in my life because, Neal, I was mad.
When you hand that photo over, you hand it over in the car at Walgreens?
Yes.
Is that the moment, looking back, you screwed yourself?
Yeah, I did, but I went and got the photo back, but he said he didn't have it. I went to his house to get the photo back. I said, you know what, Keith, give me that fucking picture. And he goes, he says, I destroyed it already. And I'm thinking, you destroyed it? Well, what the fuck did you want it for? The FBI even knew I went there. It was in the discovery. And then I'm thinking, what the fuck, So when I got my car, I'm driving away. I'm thinking, what the fuck? This guy didn't fucking destroy the picture. He probably did give it to the FBI or a fucking state's attorney. He asked for Brzezinski's address. And I told him I don't have it here. I said, I got it at home, but I don't have it. So he followed me to my house. I walked in the house, and my wife said there were some guys sitting across the street for hours, directly across the street. It was fucking so obvious. And she said that now, I think they moved up the street to the next block. So I told Keith, I said, hey, Keith, I think IED or the FBI or state's attorney or somebody was sitting outside the house. He gave me a hug, and then he jumped in his truck and took off. And then the next day, they arrested me. I put myself in that situation. Like I told the FBI, I told the assistant U.S. attorney, there was no plan to kill anybody. I said that was all words to get this guy to fucking not testify and flip on me.
What was the timeline between Herrera and this so-called plot that you were planning to kill Brzezinski? Was that days, weeks, months? The case is bad at the state level, and the feds are brought in against you. They probably need something big. So do they trap you? Do they set this trap and use Herrera as a psychological cudgel to start working on you?
Well, I thought about that too, Neal, because my attorney mentioned it again about going in and seeing these people after the first time. And He says, we need to go in and listen to what they have to say. I just wouldn't go in there. And I'm almost wondering if they couldn't get me in there because the state's attorney, I'm like, fuck you. I'm not going to talk to them anyway. They're a bunch of strokes. So maybe they needed a reason to get me in. And then, well, I mean, it probably worked out that way because later when I did my proffer to take my plea agreement, I had to tell them everything I did on the job. And they asked me so many questions, Neal, about people. I didn't want to laugh out loud. They thought that I was the key to the fucking corruption in the police department. And it was kind of amusing because I don't know if they're that naive. You would hate to think that the FBI and U.S. attorney are that naive to believe that me as a patrolman can enlighten them and tell them there's major corruption going on and lead them to the golden ticket.
Probably phishing, and it's probably standard operating procedure, right? When they have somebody like you that they have to,
it could be,
because they can flip you, you know, maybe you have something that's so huge.
Could be.
Yeah. So
it could be.
Talk about that day that you got arrested when the FBI came to your house. Have you just crashed to the fucking ground when this happens? You walk me through it. Tell that story.
I was working, a friend of mine hired me for a construction job. It was a good job. It was a union job. I left my house, walked out the front door at about 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:15 in the morning.
Are you suspended from CPD at this point?
Yes, I'm on suspension. Unpaid suspension, that's correct. I walk out, and being a policeman for as long as I was, I'm always aware of my surroundings and what's around going on. I saw a van parked across the street, a small minivan with very dark tinted windows. As I was walking in my car, I heard the side door of the van sliding open on the side I couldn't see, which would be the passenger side. I thought to myself, well, either getting killed here or arrested. 3 guys came around the side of the van, and I immediately saw the blue vest with the gold shields on, their embroidered patches on there, and recognized them to be FBI agents, plus they had the jackets on. Didn't have guns in their hands. Just walked up. I recognized one of them that I had met when I was assigned to Midway at September 11th. He walked up and he goes, "Hey, Jerry," I can't remember his name now, very, very pleasant guy. "Sorry to see you under these circumstances." And he said, "We have to place you under arrest." I said, "Okay." And he said, "It's not for what you think." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Do you have a gun on you?" And I said, "Of course not." They didn't even pat me down, actually. They placed handcuffs on me. A car pulled up. They put me in the car. And 2 of the guys that were in the car were 2 of the guys who were sitting down the street from my house. Now, let me back up a little bit. That day, I meant to mention that. When Jane told me about the car sitting down the street, I got in my car and I drove down the street and I blocked them in. They were in a parking spot, but I blocked them in. Then they rolled down the window and I backed up and let them out. Then I followed them to the Stevenson Expressway. I'm down Harlem. And they never looked at me. Looking at them the whole time, and they never looked over at me. And they got on the expressway and left. But it was 2 of the agents out of the 3 that were in the car that day that came to take me in the car.
This is earlier the morning that you're arrested.
Yes, those 2 agents were 2 of the 3 agents who were sitting on the street from my house when Herrera came to my house. They took me out. It was a helicopter flying overhead, sitting in one spot, hovering. Well, they said, "We're going to do a search warrant on your house." I said, "Okay." And I said, "Can I tell my wife so she could put the dogs away?" They didn't know what kind of dogs I had. They said, "Okay." So they gave me the phone. Jane answered the phone, and I said, "I'm under arrest. The FBI is going to do a search warrant." She goes, "Oh, brother." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Just let them in." They took me down the street and parked in an auto parts store for about 20 minutes to make sure they got into the house, the other guys. And then they took me to the new headquarters over on Roosevelt Road to process me. Didn't have any conversation with them down there.
When you get arrested and you hear that door open and they come to you, are you relieved? Are you scared? Are you surprised? What's your state of mind?
Initially, I thought I was going to be killed. I've been stealing drug money off of drug dealers. You know what I mean? So I said, I thought these guys were coming to kill me.
Why weren't you carrying a gun, by the way? Did you not carry a gun regularly at this point?
At that point, no, because I was stripped, which means I did not possess my police powers, which meant It wouldn't be illegal because I wasn't a convicted felon, but the department would jam me up for carrying a gun after I was stripped of my police powers. Not illegal, against the rules.
Were you one of these people that was like a gun nut outside of work that had 5 guns in your house and ARs and this type of stuff?
I always carried like 15 or 20 guns in my vehicle. No, I'm just kidding, Neal. I used to carry one handgun.
Back to your state of mind, this moment, you hear the door open, you think you're going to die because you think this could be a hit.
Some of those dudes were bad dudes, Neal, cartel level people. You know, you don't knock off somebody for 2 kilos, 103 kilos or whatever, or 12 kilos, whatever. I mean, some of these guys were gang members. Some were cartel people. So anything can happen. I never drove home the same fucking way all the time. I would always go out of my way to go 4 or 5 blocks one way and then go back south and then go over 2. It took me an extra 10 minutes, Neal, but you never know, man. I dealt with a lot of bad people out there. There's a lot of people that hold grudges. So I'm not going to draw them to my house. My license plates came back to home and square. I did take precautions because I had a family and I didn't want to put them in jeopardy. And I'm not talking about stealing money. I'm talking about doing police work. So getting back to that point, yeah, I was nervous, and I really did. I thought that I was going to be killed. And was I relieved to see the FBI? Maybe a little bit, because I wasn't getting killed. But who's happy to see the FBI, Neal? It's not a good thing. They're not coming for a social visit. So
up to this moment, do you think you're going to get back on the force? Are you like, this is all going to blow over? I'm going to go back. It's all a bunch of bullshit. Or are you stuck in this stasis knowing you're going to have to move through this and get a new job and your career's over before you're arrested by the FBI?
Yeah, the tide turned, and maybe not so much, because I've seen some policemen in recent history and news lately who have beat criminal cases. One guy killed somebody, on the west side, black detective, and he said that he felt threatened, and we left the scene and everything, and he walked away. He walked away from the case. The other guys accused of excessive force, they walked away. I would say the state's attorney's office, my attorney, ran the criminal division. He was a big shot, Mike Vaccaro, with the state's attorney's office. Unfortunately, he lost his position because they said that he gave access to the mob, the Harry Ailman hitman file, all the witnesses and all the testimony and the evidence. They never charged him, but he resigned from the state's attorney's office. Nonetheless, he knew the ins and outs of being a big shot in the state's attorney's office, working his way up. And he told me, he said, Jerry, they're not good with paper and pen, man. They're not fucking good trial lawyers, and they lose a lot of cases. So he said, our chances are good here at 26th and Cal. I was confident, and the reason I was confident is because I looked at the discovery, a lot of it that we were given, and we weren't given a ton of it, but it was pretty minuscule compared to what they said they had, which I don't believe they had in the first place. But the reports were pretty generic. Beat 4464 is what I was. Beat 4464, beat 4461, 63, and 65 were on the scene of such and such, where guns and narcotics were recovered, and the victim alleges $10,000 was missing. It didn't say the victim saw anybody take the money. They didn't have any video evidence of anybody taking any money. But that was the breast of their case. Don't think they had a very strong case. That's why they went forward with squeezing all these cops, because they had nothing else. So they took me down to the FBI headquarters, the new one on the Roosevelt Road, processed me, and then took me over later that afternoon for a probable cause hearing in front of a magistrate, where I was held without a bond. And never came back out until I was discharged from prison.
You were held without a bond?
Correct.
That's, I don't want to say ironic, but interesting in the state of Illinois today that we have no cash bail in 2023. But was that odd?
Yeah, I thought it was odd. The U.S. attorney, I can't prove it, but I'm sure the U.S. attorney went to the magistrate, said, this is a widespread police corruption case, and this guy's one of the key players, and we need to pressure him. And, the judges go along with that. They held me without a bond to try to get me to cooperate.
When they take you away from your residence, well, first off, they search your house. Are you present for that?
Oh, no. No, I would later learn about the warrant when my wife came to see me down at the MCC about the search. In addition to that, a couple of my friends came to see me and told me about it. And they also asked me about it. It was pretty ironic because Rudy Giuliani started this type of search warrant, I should say showcase. So what they do is they'll go in and they'll remove from your home 99% of the time stuff that has no evidentiary value. In my case, it was 100% no evidentiary value. There was nothing illegal in my home. And what they took out of there for their extravaganza show was all of my police uniforms, my garbage, some ammunition, various paperwork, personal financial stuff, our computer. That's about it. Straight bullshit out of my house. Some they returned, some they didn't return. It was pretty fucked up because Jane tried to get back stuff, family pictures and personal financial records and stuff, and they never gave them back. The uniforms and all that stuff, I paid for those. But they put on a big show, and they can't walk out of there with nothing, so they had to walk out of there with something, and that's what they walked out. So everybody on the block got to see them walking out with 40 boxes because they could say, wow, they brought 40 boxes of stuff out of Finnegan's house. The only problem is, if they were transparent boxes, they would have saw there were 40 boxes of bullshit. Nothing criminal. Zero. Not a fucking thing. They found nothing. And they searched, and they searched. And finally my wife said, yeah, you've been here for 4 hours. That's about enough. And she said, I'm going to start making phone calls and complaining because this is fucking ridiculous. But I don't know what they were looking for.
They take you to where?
They took me to Roosevelt Road, FBI headquarters.
What happens when you go there?
They asked me, do I want to make any statements? And I said, no, thank you. They took my fingerprints, took my photo. Actually, I'd like to get that photo, to be honest with you.
Have you seen it?
No, I've never seen it. From there, they transported me down to the Metropolitan Correctional Center, and then I had a hearing in front of a judge later in the afternoon. All the grunge guys were there.
When you say grunge guys, you mean the Alice in Chains, Soundgarden guys from Walgreens on the grassy hill?
Yeah, exactly. From the grassy knoll, yeah. But I can't go back. So they're surveilling me. It was kind of like Inspector Clouseau.
You knew that the FBI was circling.
Yeah.
When you go to the MCC, which is a pretty dreadful place, are you panicked? Are you pissed? Where is your head?
I'm disgusted. I'm being arrested by the FBI, and I'm going to the MCC. Of course, there's some concern. I'm a Chicago policeman, and they're putting me at the MCC, where every gangbanger in the fucking city's at that's got a dope case by the feds. This is going to be a problem. They put me into, it's called a special housing unit on the 11th floor. And they put me in a solitary confinement cell by myself. Here I am, and I'm like, what the fuck? In a daze a little bit.
Is this surreal?
Yeah.
Is it your worst nightmare?
Yeah.
Having been putting these people away into these environments, you're in this environment.
360 now. Yeah. I'm thrust in the environment, and it's noisy. People kicking the fucking cell doors, screaming, fucking yelling at each other.
It's not like you're out of your element in terms of the people you're around.
No. Here's the thing. They immediately knew who I was. It's all over the fucking media the next day. So I got people yelling across to me, hey, come by your door. Come by your door. They want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to these motherfuckers.
You're talking about other prisoners.
Yeah, other inmates.
You're not scared of these people in the way that, like, I would be, because I don't arrest them, engage in policing, but you're scared for your safety, and you're in the worst case scenario because as someone in law enforcement, you're inside a jail now, but you're not cowering.
Intimidated.
Yeah.
No, not intimidated. They don't intimidate me because I dealt with these people on the street every fucking day. So no, they don't intimidate me. It's the possibility of being stabbed or beat down or worse than that. I mean, the beat down is one thing. Someone stabs you. I don't know if they have the ability to make call it a shank. They have an ability to have that weapon, which I doubt where I'm at. There's other ways. They put you in the population, and at that time there's microwaves. Guys can heat up hair gel. They can heat up baby oil. Why do they sell baby oil in prison? kind of a mystery to me. You know, they have an argument with each other and they're fucking heating up baby oil in a fucking microwave until they throw it on somebody's face. And I don't want to go through that deal. So I'm in there and my lawyer comes to see me and goes, I go, what the fuck's going on with no bond here? He's like, well, they don't want to give you the bond because they think that you're dangerous. All right. Yeah, I'm dangerous. They know who the fuck I am. Neal, where am I going to go? I'm kept there in solitary confinement, and it's a long, drawn-out thing. My lawyer, actually I had two lawyers. One was a just recently retired supervisor for the U.S. Attorney's Office, a sharp guy. Luck would have it, the prosecuting attorney who was with the U.S. Attorney's Office worked under my lawyer. He was his subordinate, and they hated each other's fucking guts. So I guess it wasn't a good pick as a lawyer. So it made things a little heated during our conversations when I went over there and I did my proffer to tell him. You sat with your two lawyers, which I had, because my one lawyer was not admitted into federal courts. So he had to have him as his partner.
Are these lawyers appointed to you by the police department?
Oh, no. These lawyers were paid for. They were paid lawyers.
Is your union, the police union, do they provide legal services for people that are in these situations? Or does the city?
No. So what the union does is they'll meet, they'll decide if they're going to afford you legal representation, and they chose not to in my case.
And does that predate the Fed's involvement that they chose not to represent you? Does it go back to
the state too? Yes.
Was this something that bothered you immensely, or is the legal representation weak?
Yeah, I paid into union dues and paid into the legal defense fund and all that for many years. They chose not to, but they mostly represent guys for on-duty stuff that involves like shootings and stuff like that. So I can see the point to that. On the other hand,
did it bother you?
Yeah, it did bother me. It did bother me, but what am I going to do? I can't sue them. What am I going to do? I have to hire a lawyer.
We'll talk about this later, but is this like another stone on the pile of the police department really isn't looking out for its members?
You'd like to say it's a separate entity, but it's not. They sleep with the city. Under this new guy, Catanzaro, he's got some balls. He doesn't lay down. I think that he's a good president. He's got these guys' backs to the extent that he can, and he's a fighter. All the previous administrations before him, they rolled over. The city fucking gave them their marching orders. They were ineffective, I could say that. It's not a union. It's a fraternal organization. It was started by the city of Chicago. It was their idea, the city, because there were a bunch of other people vying to start a union. They said, what's the worse or evil? Somebody that we can dictate to and we can start up, or somebody that is going to be an unknown entity to them. They're not effective.
Not to belabor the point, they choose not to represent you, which is not a surprise to you, but it's another point of frustration to some degree. They don't have my back.
Well, of course, they don't have your back when you're on the job. Their hands are tied. Internal Affairs wants to do something to you, or COPA, used to be called Office of Professional Standards. New name, same game.
Go to your state of mind when you're there at MCC, the first day, and where your head is and what's happening.
I don't know what's going to go on. I really didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I want to stay upbeat, don't want to be depressed, but it's hard. You don't have any contact with your family. I didn't have a visit for the first, I think, week or two. I can't remember. You get a 15-minute monitored phone call, and you get one fucking 15-minute call a month. I fucking started bitching about it. And thank God I had a counselor there. Two counselors. One was not my counselor, but she was a very nice woman, and I got along well with her. Counselor I had as a man, and I got along well with him. Both African-American people. They were great people. They were cool. They treated me very nice. They gave me some phone calls and legal phone calls. You're allowed to make legal phone calls to check in with my lawyer. I have this lawyer. He's good, but he just never comes to see me because he said it costs money to come and see me. And I'm thinking, well, what the fuck do I have you for? But it just drags on and drags on. And Neal, I got continuance after continuance. Mike was fighting for me, so was Dean. In my presence, and they told the U.S. attorney and the FBI guys, they said, you don't have a fucking murder for hire case here. The guy's name is Dean Palelis, and he said, I just left this office. I prosecuted these cases, and you don't have a fucking murder for hire. There was no money exchanged. There was no hitman. There was no act of furtherance. There was nobody.
When you get to the MCC and you know what's happening to you, it's all downloaded. You've had a chance to settle in and understand what you're facing. This murder for hire charge, everything else is secondary.
I wasn't worried about state charges because they were going nowhere. I told my lawyer to his face, I said, Mike, I looked at the discovery. You looked at the discovery. They've done some fucked up things. They've done some hedging on prosecutorial misconduct, violated the security issues where they're using the same lawyer for all of these clients, these guys who testified against me at the grand jury. I don't even want to fucking talk about the state cases. He told me, and Dean, my other lawyer, and we talked to the U.S. attorney, and I told him, I will not plea out to this. I won't plea to it. And it continue. Every time I'd have to go over there for the continuances, it's funny because I would see the same FBI agents who were in different capacities undercover. I guess it was like a test. These two agents would have somebody else come with them to see if I recognized them. And I thought it was hilarious because these agents were the same ones I saw on the street watching me.
This was when they take you over to the federal building.
I guess they didn't realize that I would recognize them. They wanted to see if they blew their cover or not. I never let on that I recognized them.
In these early stages, let's call it in the first weeks, months, are you seeing some light at the end of the tunnel? You end up staying in solitary confinement for 4 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
At the MCC?
That's correct.
You don't get a trial date. Or are you moving towards a trial date in those 4 years, or are you negotiating a plea agreement?
Or negotiating a plea agreement. I couldn't take it to trial, especially on that charge, because my lawyers even said, we're not taking it that. And he told them, we're not going to agree to it. So they kept fighting back and forth. You know, the U.S. attorney, and then a couple times he says, well, I got to think what I'm going to charge him with. We got it to the point where it was going to be civil rights violations, which the murder for hire was going to be dropped, because they were not going to be able to go forward with it without me agreeing to plead to it. Because my lawyer, Dean Palelas, told him, he says, okay, we'll take it to trial. Fuck it. He says, I put these trials on. You don't have it. And that was his boss. That was the U.S. Assistant U.S. Attorney's boss. So I think they were a little fearful of him. But it got to the point where my attorney at the time, Ficarro, he was more concerned with business and bringing billing to his firm that he worked with as a partner on the lawsuits against me and the other officers for the city. And he saw the ability to make a lot of money on billing. And they didn't want to talk about my criminal case. They wanted to talk about my civil cases. And finally, I got to the point where I just told them, I'm not talking about these fucking civil cases anymore. I could give two fucks about them. I said, I don't have a penny. They're not going to get anything out of me, so I could care less. I just told him, don't come over here anymore. You tell Mike to come and see me. So he came, and he's like, you have no right to talk to him like that. I said, I don't care. And he got smart, and I said, you know, Mike, you're fired. You're done. I'm done with you. And I fired him that day. He left. That was the end of it. And I sent him a letter and hired another guy. His name was Mark Barnett. That was the biggest fucking mistake I made.
Hiring him or getting rid of Ficarro?
Probably both. Barnett was a fucking useless fucking piece of shit. Liar. Lied to his fucking teeth and delivered me out to them.
Okay, we're going to stop there. Stay connected for the next conversation when we discuss Jerry's time in jail. Don't forget to follow us on X, and thanks again for listening.